Welcome to Joy Recovery Radio. This is an educational podcast about betrayal trauma, deceptive sexuality, and the integrity work required when a relationship has been harmed by hidden sexual behavior. You might be here because you're trying to understand what happened in your relationship, or you might be here because you're trying to figure out what comes next. Either way, there's a place for you in this conversation. We talk about betrayal and recovery in a way that honors both what was lost and what might be rebuilt. You're invited to listen slowly, take what resonates, and leave the rest. Let's begin.
Welcome back to another episode of Joy Recovery.
I say welcome back to you.
I know.
We haven't cast a pod together in a while. It's good to have you next to me.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
That is one of the questions. How come Jacqueline doesn't join you in many of the podcasts? So what's up with that?
I like to stay behind the scenes and do a lot of it that way, but it's sometimes a capacity issue, you know?
Quite often it is, yeah.
So it's not that I'm not aware of the content. A lot of the content we construct together, and it's mutually agreed upon. It's our story in real time, but
Often recorded at 5 a.m. because that's when it's quiet.
that's very true.
And you're very quiet then too.
I'm super quiet.
But we did have a question that came in recently that is a very common issue.
Yeah, it is. And thank you to the person who submitted this question. So, quote, when does a betrayed partner's expertise in recovery accidentally become scaffolding that prevents the betrayer from developing his own? End quote. This is a pattern that we see all the time.
All the time. Quite common.
A man in recovery whose wife can explain his recovery better than he can, that's not uncommon.
And we're going to explain why today.
Well, part of it is she's read the book, she's on the podcast, she's found the therapist, she's finding the meetings, she's tracking the check-ins, and basically he just shows up and cooperates or doesn't cooperate.
Yeah. So we're going to spend this episode on that particular question. But before we do, there was one word in the question that stood out to both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't deal with that first, everything else that we talk about for the rest of our time together might land wrong. What's the word that stood out to you?
Accidentally.
Accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
Accidentally becomes scaffolding is
Mm-hmm.
the way it's worded. And the reason that stood out to both of us is it places the cause of his stalled development on her. If her expertise became the scaffolding for his recovery, then her expertise is what's holding him back.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, the fix is for her to know less and to do less,
Mm-hmm.
to move out of the way, to step aside so he can finally grow. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand why the question is worded that way. You know, because from the outside, the correlation looks obvious, right? She's the expert, he's the passive, or he's the avoidant. And the two positions seem to hold each other in this really grounded place. Now, if you spend any time in recovery communities, like we have, we often hear like, well, let him fall, stop managing him, get out the way. And a lot of people have been conditioned to hear that, to do that because of professional advice.
The problem that you and I have with that is really centered around causation.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could call it the sequence, whichever one. Think about it this way. First, he built a hidden lie, or in the language that we use on this show, drawn from the Manwala model, he constructed a secret sexual basement. He designed it. He maintained it. He designed the cover stories to keep it secret. Secondly, he distorted her ability to see it. He used gaslighting, lying by omission,
Minimization.
He rewrote events that she actually remembered correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So he had this campaign for years, maybe even decades, where he trained her to doubt the accuracy of her own perception. Then, thirdly, comes D-Day. And after D-Day, what do most partners do?
Dive in.
They become an expert.
Mm-hmm.
She reads everything she can find because the one person who owed her the truth was withholding it. So she learned recovery vocabulary. She learned clinical vocabulary. And it finally described what she had been living inside for years, but she didn't have the language for it. So when the question asked, when her expertise becomes the thing that's preventing his growth, our answer is it doesn't. It never did. Her expertise is a response to his lack of initiative and to his lack of capacity.
I want to take it just to the core because there's something genuinely worth examining here. We just need to kind of shift it and relocate it first. So I think the useful question was, what has he failed to build and why her knowledge became necessary in the first place? Why did she have to become the expert? Why did she have to read the books? Why did she need this understanding?
That is the pertinent question. And I feel like I need to offer a public minor correction of my own here because I haven't always addressed this or taught this very well. Years ago, I would have treated this as a boundary issue for her. I would have said that she needed to hand his recovery back to him and stay on her side of the street. The problem now that I see with that line of thinking is that is making her responsible for fixing a dynamic that he created. She did not create this. This is actually cyclical. This is a pattern. Why don't you describe what the pattern is?
Yeah, so in a lot of these marriages, the man has handed the thinking part of his recovery to his wife. There's an expectation there, and I mean that almost literally.
Mm-hmm.
The executive function of his recovery, meaning the planning, the tracking, the initiating, and the remembering, lives in her head and has never lived in his. Here's what the pattern looks like. She found the therapist and booked the intake. She knows the day of the week that he goes to this meeting. She knows the week of the program that he's in. She knows, well, I don't want to even really say this often because so many times we don't know what step he's on. But for some of us, we know what step he's on. She knows the framework that he's supposedly working, and
He can only recite maybe a third of it.
so she notices his pattern shifting before he does. And therefore, she initiates every hard conversation. She remembers that the check-in stopped 2 weeks ago. If you ask him, he's been doing it consistently. Oh yeah, I've been doing check-ins. I've missed a couple. When actually, he agreed to do the check-ins. He agreed to doing them every single day. And now he's leaning on her to tell him that, hey, you stopped doing check-ins. We agreed that you would do them every day. So he's actually leaning on her for direction. And that takes away her ability to focus on herself.
Do you want to go deeper with teaching, like what you're hearing today? That's why we created the Joy Recovery Academy. The Academy is our flagship educational space, designed to help you make sense of betrayal trauma, integrity abuse, and what real recovery actually looks like. This is where clarity replaces confusion, and where you finally get a map for your recovery, for both the betrayer and the betrayed. The Academy includes live teaching with Q&A twice a week, and every live teaching is available anytime in our on-demand video library in case you can't make the live event. The Academy also features hundreds of the same tools and resources that we use with our private coaching clients. Right now, you can get the first 7 days free, so you can check it out and see if it is what you're looking for. Go to joy-recovery.com, click Academy, and join us today.
And if the men would do one exercise, if they would go down the list of every recovery related thing in your life and your marriage and just make 2 columns. What the task is in column 1, and in column 2, who initiated it most recently. And for a lot of men, that second column has one name in it, and it's not theirs. Why does that happen? Why does a man become so passive in his recovery? There's a few reasons, and they end up compounding, snowballing on each other. The first reason is deception weakens the exact capacities that recovery requires. If a man who spent 15 years managing a double life mastered his skills of concealment, secrecy, image management, compartmentalization, that means that he had zero practice at self-observation, deep reflection, self-disclosure, or sustained voluntary accountability.
I was going to say accountability.
Yeah. So when his basement got exposed, he's now being asked to use muscles that he never built.
But that's not her fault.
No, his wife, meanwhile, has been running her vigilance muscles at full throttle for years now.
Mm-hmm.
The capability gap is enormous, and tasks tend to flow towards whoever's more capable. So we're explaining it, but we're not endorsing it. Second reason that men often get passive and just let her drive the recovery.
Can I add one thing about that?
Sure.
He's relying on her to be the one who's driving all of this. And because she's the capable one, but she's really not.
That's a good point.
She can't handle all of it.
It's not fair.
This is where the nervous system collapses, and it's just more weight on her, and she cannot focus on her own individual healing because she feels forced to manage and look at what the heck he's doing or not doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a double-edged sword.
There's a second reason that this pattern keeps happening, on his side especially, and that is that compliance is more comfortable for him. A man who attends everything and agrees with everything and completes whatever is handed to him looks like a man who's in genuine recovery. From the outside and often from inside his own head, he feels like, I'm doing the work. What he's actually doing is he's being managed. Compliance, where someone else is running your recovery, can look like progress from a distance. But capacity is different from compliance. Capacity is a different animal. And the difference shows up the moment nobody prompts him anymore. Not to mention that he is complying on the outside, but often men who are compliant and their partner is managing their recovery, they comply on the outside, but they are building resentments on the inside because they feel like they're being controlled by her.
Deep resentment.
A third reason we've seen for this pattern is letting her drive it is actually a subtle form of entitlement that's still active. The same belief system that built the basement, the one that says that my comfort is most important and someone else gets to pay for my comfort. That entitled belief system does not die at D-Day. It morphs. The entitlement adapts into recovery. Before discovery, she unknowingly carried the emotional labor of a marriage that was built on false information. But after discovery, she now carries the administrative labor of his recovery and his repair. So it's the same entitled belief, but now it's going a different direction.
Do you think that that's intentional because he knows it's only a matter of time before she collapses?
Intentional or not, most entitled beliefs are unconscious. They drive us and we don't even know they are. So I'm reluctant to say that this is intentional. The outcome is the same, whether it's intentional or not. He's letting her drive the recovery bus.
And she's not going to be able to sustain driving that bus.
A fourth reason for this pattern that we've seen for the passivity of men in their recovery and being managed by their wife for their recovery is fear. Some men genuinely believe that if I take the wheel, I will crash it. Her competence is legitimate. His track record is terrible. And for him to step up, that means that he is going to risk visible failure at the exact moment that his failures carry maximum consequence for her. So he gladly defers. And he may even call the deferring to her humility.
Yeah. You know, the opposite is also true. She's tracking and managing his recovery because she's afraid. She's afraid that if I don't do it,
He'll stop.
he'll stop doing recovery.
Yeah.
If I back off, he's going to drop the ball and I'm going to have to endure more pain and he's going to relapse. So both are true.
Totally true. Here is something that we call the structural test of his recovery. And this is the test. If a man's integrity, if a man's recovery requires the relationship to continue in order to be sustained, that's not integrity. That's not real recovery. Real integrity, true recovery, is partner independent. If she stopped tomorrow, if she never reminded him again, if she never scheduled his sessions again, if she never tracked his recovery again, if she never initiated again, how much of his recovery would still be running in 30 days? Whatever survives that experiment, that is what actually belongs to him. Whatever collapses in 30 days was what she was carrying the whole time. And he was just borrowing it from her.
Very true.
The question that men should sit with on this one: what part of my recovery exists only because she's managing it? Write that down. Every item on it that she's managing is a capacity that he has outsourced to her, and he needs to bring it back on him, one at a time. And we recommend, without announcing it and without expecting credit for it, you just do it because it's what you should have been doing the whole time. Here's the deeper meaning. As long as your wife is the tracker, then his recovery has a supervisor. And supervised behavior doesn't require any internal conviction on his part. And it gives him someone to resent and eventually someone to blame. I have seen men who hide inside being managed for their recovery for years.
Let's talk about two terms that are common in our communities: over-functioning and under-functioning.
Those do show up a lot. People are using a particular framework that doesn't translate well to recovery context. Those two terms, over-functioning and under-functioning, come from what's called Bowen family systems theory. It's developed by the psychiatrist Murray Bowen. In that particular model, families manage anxiety through a handful of predictable patterns. And one of them is a pattern in which one person takes on more and more of the shared responsibility while the other takes on less and less. The over-functioner manages, plans, and caretakes. The under-functioner drifts, defers, and depends. Bowen's insight was that the two positions create each other. Each person is managing their own anxiety through the other person. And the prescription in his model is for both people to develop what Bowen calls differentiation of self. That is the capacity to regulate your own functioning without outsourcing it to someone else. That's a real theory. It's been influential for decades, ever since it came out. inside its own purpose, I have a tremendous amount of respect for it. But if you lay it over what we're describing today, when you try to apply it to recovery context, at first it seems to fit perfectly. She is over functioning. He is under functioning. That is the cycle. Boom, case closed. We don't use those terms. We actively recommend against it for recovery language. And we want to give you the reasons why. Words matter more than you think they do, especially in recovery. The first reason we don't use those terms is what the model assumes. Bowen's reciprocity describes two people responding to shared anxiety inside a shared reality. Both parties can see reality. Both are adapting to the same facts. That assumption fails completely in this context. We're talking about deceptive sexuality. We're talking about one person that manufactured a false reality on purpose and confined their partner inside it. She wasn't adapting to shared anxiety. She wasn't adapting to shared reality. She was adapting to engineered false information. So calling her position over-functioning treats a legitimate response to covert abuse as if it's just an ordinary anxiety issue. That is her fault. She brought it into the marriage. So we don't subscribe to that. The second reason we don't use this model and what it prescribes is that family systems work asks both parties to change because it locates the problem in the pattern between them, not the people and their behavior. So when you take this model and you apply it to deceptive sexuality, that distributes responsibility for an abuse dynamic to both people. So half of it lands on the person who was being deceived, the person who was harmed. We, Jacqueline and I, will never teach a model that hands a betrayed partner an assignment as the condition of her husband's harm to stop. There's a third reason we don't use these labels, over-functioning and under-functioning. I have sat across from men who came home from a therapy session and told their wives in a very calm, confident voice that she was over-functioning and she needed to work on it. The term gave him a credentialed sounding way to blame her and to criticize her vigilance, when instead her vigilance was a wound that he caused. So Jacqueline and I are not going to use any vocabulary that converts that easily into a weapon that can be used against her, no matter how good the theory is.
Yeah, I want to add just one thing, because women hear this label far more than men do. If someone has called you an overfunctioner, I invite you to hold that word up to the light and look at what it erases. So what happens is it erases the years when your accurate perceptions were denied to your face. It erases the fact that your tracking began as a way to survive inside a reality someone else was falsifying. A woman who monitors, researches, and manages after betrayal is a woman whose mind kept working under conditions designed to break it. That deserves a more respectable description than a label that makes her sound like the co-author of her own harm.
That is so true. Exactly.
You may have heard the pod question today and felt a similar sting, because maybe you're the wife who can explain his program better than he can. Maybe you found every therapist he has ever seen. Maybe you have wondered whether your competence is somehow in the way. Hold this to be true. Your expertise is a record of your survival. When reality stops being reliable, a healthy mind goes looking for solid ground. That's what we do. You read the books because you're looking for truth that he was withholding. You learned the clinical language because you were finally given words for things that you had been feeling for years. You started tracking because your gut kept sounding this alarm and you needed to know whether you could believe it or not. Most of us stop listening to what I call those God nudges because every time we mention them, we were overridden or made to feel crazy for even suggesting such a thing. Every hour of that research was your mind doing exactly what minds are built to do when someone corrupts their information supply. I also know that carrying his recovery is heavy. I've done that. Many of you are tired in a way that sleep does very little for. You became the project manager of a repair you never asked for, something you didn't even break. And some days it feels like carrying everything is overwhelming and too much. If that's you, I want you to hear this. Noticing the weight is information about what you're carrying. It's nothing negative about you, and it creates no obligation for you to keep carrying it forever. At some point, we do have to set it down, but that's going to take you having some safety to feel like you can set it down.
That's right.
Now I want to address the advice that usually follows this topic because some of you will encounter it. Some of you may have already encountered it, and I want you to be ready for it. So there's advice that's going to say, step back, stop tracking, let him fall. And if you do this, he will finally rise. Here's what that advice does. It asks you to set down a safety behavior your nervous system may still be using to stay oriented. And it asks you to set it down for his benefit on his schedule. There may be a day when the tracking feels heavier than the safety it provides. When that day comes, it's worth exploring. It's worth exploring gently, with support, at whatever pace is true for you. Setting down something from strength feels completely different from having it pulled out of your hand.
I think
Really,
that's very helpful and necessary guidance, because for some partners, they're still in that first stage of stabilization, and the tracking and the managing his recovery and what she's doing is a part of her safety right now. And to be pressured to set that down before she's ready could actually destabilize her.
it could. I do want to add this caveat. If it's been years and years and years and you're still doing this, you need to really examine, is this person going to change? But can you do that long term? No,
Not sustainable.
it's
No.
not sustainable. I promise you. Tracking, managing his recovery, it's going to cost you something long term. And if you feel like you can't let it go, because if you do, he's going to go back into old behaviors, you have to really examine. He might.
He might. And that is data that is important for you to know. It influences what you decide about your future.
I just had this conversation with a client. I said, right now, you just need to get on solid ground so
Yeah.
your nervous system can stabilize.
I want to spend 3 minutes with the men. That is the most important part of this episode. So slow down, take this in. Some of you are going to finish this episode and you feel this epiphany, this light come on. You'll recognize yourself in that outsourcing pattern that we've talked about. And you'll realize, I have been passive. She has been managing my recovery. And you're going to feel motivated today to do something about it. And the first thing many of you will want to do, as soon as you listen to this, is to talk to her about it. And to tell her, I've realized you've been carrying too much in my recovery. And you're even going to suggest that she's been over-functioning and that you're ready to stop under-functioning and you're ready to take things back. Don't do that. I don't recommend that. And let me tell you why. That conversation relocates the spotlight onto her behavior. It takes this teaching about your passivity and converts it into feedback about her and what she's doing. It's using the language of your recovery to critique the person that your behavior harmed. Here's what I recommend instead. Say nothing to her about this. Don't send her this episode. Don't reference it. Here's what you do instead. Change. Change your behavior today. Pick up 3 things that she's been carrying and start carrying it. Don't make an announcement about it. Just be consistent. Start today. If she notices, she notices. She gets to decide what it means and when it means something. Her noticing is hers. Your job is to start carrying. So here's the assignment. 2 steps. Both of them observable. Step 1, make that 2-column list we talked about. Every recovery-related task currently running in your life and in your marriage in the left-hand column. Who's scheduling therapy? Who's initiating check-ins? Just all the tasks. I'm going to a therapist. I'm going to groups. I have a coach. I have these accountability practices. I'm doing these readings. Everything. And then next to each item, write who initiated it most recently. I didn't say that you agreed. That doesn't count. I didn't say that you were willing. That doesn't count. Who initiated it? And then step 2, choose 3 items from that column that she's been initiating and move it to your responsibility and don't tell her. Own it completely. That means that you remember it, you schedule it, you follow through, you execute it, you do it all. But your silence is part of the assignment. The reason I want you silent is I don't want you announcing this. I don't want you performing this. I just want you doing it with no strings attached, no expectation of validation from her. I will make a prediction, and this is coming from a place of experience. Somewhere in the first 2 weeks, you're going to feel an urge for her to notice it. That urge is your entitlement. It's the part of you that still believes that your effort should earn something from her. When that urge rises, and it will, just let it pass. Don't act on it. Don't announce all the great things that you've done. Just take your recovery, take responsibility for it, and quietly be consistent with it. Take it off of her plate.
I do hope that the men listen to this. If you see that she's consistently asking you, hey, what are you doing for recovery? Or would you listen to this podcast? Come on, she's not asking for too much.
She's not. And for the person that submitted this question, what we hear you asking is, are you supposed to set this down? And our reply to you is, you get to decide that. That is your sovereignty. If it feels safe to continue to help drive his recovery, then do that. If you feel like you're strong enough to let that go, then let it go.
One caveat to that, I would ask this person, how long
Have you been carrying it?
How long have you been carrying it? And why are you still carrying it? And what advice would you give to your daughter or your best friend if they were in this position?
Yeah. We want you to hear that you're not over-functioning. You're not to blame.
Yeah.
You're not the reason he's passive.
No,
You're not the reason his recovery is stalled. This is not your fault. There's nothing you're doing that's causing his stalling. This is your healing. You do what feels safe for you. It's been so long since we cast a pod together. Do you remember how we close?
Yeah.
Let's do it. We don't get to close together like
No,
this too
we
often.
don't. But you're so good at doing these podcasts. Like, you don't really need me to chime in all the time.
Well, I love it when you're next to me.
I appreciate it.
Remember,
Joy is possible.
when you live in integrity.
Thank you for listening to Joy Recovery Radio. If today's episode was helpful, you can find additional educational resources and information about the Joy Recovery Academy at joy-recovery.com. Remember, joy is possible when you live in integrity.